It's strange how life can shift from something simple and steady to a slow, relentless storm without warning. 5 years ago, I had a routine, a rhythm. My name is Thomas Alden, and back then I was 60 years old in decent shape, and had every reason to believe I had time, real time, left to enjoy the years ahead. I worked for decades as a train station supervisor in our small town. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it gave me something I valued more than prestige: consistency. I liked watching the trains come and go, greeting the same familiar passengers, solving little problems before they became big ones. I enjoyed my position, my quiet respect, and the structure it gave me. On weekends, I went fishing. I used to climb 3 flights of stairs to my apartment without thinking. I'd make spaghetti on Sundays, mow the lawn at my daughter's house when she needed help, and even managed to keep up with modern tech just enough to video chat with my grandchildren. I wasn't a superhero, just a man with a slow, pleasant life. I had been widowed for nearly a decade. My wife Margaret passed from lung cancer, the quiet, devastating kind. We were married 34 years. Her loss hollowed me out, but I built around that emptiness. I kept her memory alive in the little ways. Her wind chimes still hang by the kitchen window. Her favorite blue mug is still in the cabinet. I kept her scarves. I don't wear them, of course, but I like knowing they are there. Our only son, David, was complicated. He was the kind of boy who always reached higher, who thought enough was for people who gave up. I thought my job was decent. He thought it was mediocre. I valued loyalty. He valued climbing. And yet I was proud of him, truly. He became a senior analyst at an insurance firm, married a woman named Heather who worked in finance, and had 2 kids, Mia and Julian. I saw them once a month. Family dinners. Scheduled, predictable, more polite than warm. And then came the fall. Not metaphorical, a literal fall. I had been feeling off for weeks. Numbness, balance issues, a kind of weakness in my limbs I couldn't explain. But when I fell in the parking lot of the grocery store and couldn't get up, I knew something was wrong. Tests, scans, appointments. Then the words, progressive multiple sclerosis. A quiet sentence, but it thundered through my head like a train coming off the rails. They said I might have 2 or 3 years of semi-independence left. After that, I'd need help. Maybe total care. My body would slowly betray me. That's the nature of the disease. It chips away at you, one function at a time, until you forget what it ever felt like to be strong. Since then, my world has shrunk. I can't cook the way I used to. I have a walker now. The stairs in my building feel like cliffs. I rely on frozen meals, grocery deliveries, and the hope that I'll have enough energy to get from the bed to the bathroom in the morning. David knows, of course. I told him everything. His reaction was professional. He listened, he nodded, he even Googled it during the conversation. Then he asked if I had long-term care insurance. Not how do you feel, or what can I do? Just numbers, planning, logistics. I didn't ask him to step in. I didn't expect a miracle, but I had hoped he might say something more, something human. I wasn't looking for tears, just acknowledgement that I was scared, that this wasn't fair. But that acknowledgement never came. And so I sit here, alone in my apartment, watching dust dance in the sunlight, wondering how a life that once felt full could become so small. My dignity is something I cling to, maybe the only thing I have left that disease hasn't touched. At least not yet. It was Sunday, family dinner day. I always looked forward to it, even if I didn't quite know why anymore. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because I still hoped something would shift, that warmth would crack through the surface of routine. Or maybe because I just didn't want to eat alone that night. I ordered food: lasagna, salad, garlic bread. Italian, hearty, simple. I used to cook myself, but my hands tremble now when I chop, and sometimes I can't even hold a knife. Ordering is easier, more manageable, less humiliating. At exactly 6:00 p.m., the doorbell rang. David was first through the door, wearing that same polished expression he always wore when he had somewhere else to be. He kissed me on the cheek without really touching skin and said, "Hey, Dad, how are you doing?" It was automatic, a checkbox. I answered the same way I always do, not bad. A lie, but a necessary one. Heather followed him in, phone in hand, not even glancing at me as she walked straight into the kitchen. The kids trailed behind, already glued to their tablets. "Say hi to Grandpa," David instructed. Mia 10 gave me a half wave without looking up. Julian 8 blinked slowly, then mumbled a hello before settling into the couch. I tried not to let it sting. "Did you order food?" David asked, flopping onto my armchair like it was his. "Please tell me it's not that same Chinese place." Heather had indigestion for 2 days. "It's Italian," I replied. "Should be here soon." Heather reappeared with a grimace. "Italian, David, you know I'm low-carb right now. Lasagna, really." David raised his eyebrows and gestured toward me like I was the one who had committed the crime. "Dad just didn't think of it. It's okay. I'm sure there's salad." "I'll eat at home," Heather muttered, waving me off with the same gesture you'd give a waiter who brought the wrong drink. "Don't worry about it." I didn't. Not anymore. We sat in silence for a while, broken only by Heather complaining about their gym's new billing system and David talking about a house they'd seen online near the coast. Big yard, ocean view, 3 bedrooms, great school district. I nodded politely, pretended to care, but inside I felt small, irrelevant, like I was in the room but not part of it. The food arrived and David paid before I could reach for my wallet. "Come on, Dad," he said, smirking. "You're on a fixed income. Let me do something." I hated that tone, half kind, half condescending. I had savings. A good chunk, too, but I'd never told him. I didn't want him to see dollar signs when he looked at me. At the table, Heather picked at the salad with a fork like it was contaminated. David piled on pasta like it was his last meal. The kids barely looked up. "Dad, you really need a haircut," he said between bites. "You're starting to look like you wandered out of a retirement home." I ran my fingers through my hair. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't been able to get to the barber in months. "You can have someone come to the house," Heather added. "It's not that expensive." I nodded and took a bite of cold garlic bread. Nora finally looked up. "Grandpa, why do you eat so slow?" "Because Grandpa has a disease," Heather replied casually. "His hands don't move like they used to." "Is it contagious?" she asked, alarmed. "No, sweetie," Heather laughed, patting her on the head. "It's just because Grandpa's old." I was 65. Old, yes, but not ancient. And it wasn't the age that had slowed me down, it was the disease. The difference mattered to me. It didn't seem to matter to them. David asked for more napkins, then Parmesan, then more water. Each time he asked like I was staff, not his father, and each time I got up, slowly, painfully, pretending it was nothing. Every step cost me effort, but I did it. Not because I wanted to serve them, but because I didn't want to give them another excuse to call me useless. Eventually, as we were finishing up, David put down his fork and wiped his mouth. "Dad," he said, "we've been meaning to talk to you about something. Heather and I think it's time to start seriously considering a care facility." I stared at him. "You mean a nursing home?" I asked. "A senior residence," Heather corrected. "Much better word, modern, clean, with professional staff." I shook my head. "I don't want that." "Be reasonable," David said, leaning forward. "You can't live alone much longer. You can't cook. You can barely move. You'll be safer in a place that's built for people like you." "I'm not ready for that," I replied. "I still manage." "Manage?" He laughed softly. "You can't even carry a plate without help. It's only a matter of time before something happens. And who will be there? Us." There it was. The real message. "We can't take care of you," Heather added. "Not full time. We both work. We have the kids. This is the only sustainable option." For them, not for me. Julian, without looking up, said, "Grandpa, can you change the channel? I want to watch soccer." David turned to me. "We've actually already found a place. It's about 20 minutes from here. Sunny Terrace. They've got 24-hour care. A little garden, it's decent." "I'm not going." "You're being stubborn." "No," I said quietly, "I'm being human." They didn't argue much after that. The rest of the night played out in silence and shallow goodbyes. As the door closed behind them, I stood in the quiet, my body aching, my hands trembling, my heart sore. I wasn't a father to them anymore. I was an obligation, a problem, a job. That night I sat at the table long after the leftovers went cold, just staring at the empty chairs. And I wondered, was this the price of getting old? Becoming invisible in your own family? I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing David's voice echo in my head. "We can't take care of you." And Heather's tone clipped, cold, like I was an overdue bill they couldn't pay. The phrase care facility had been used like a solution, but to me, it felt like exile. I wasn't naive. I knew what my illness meant. I knew I couldn't keep living completely alone forever. The stairs were winning. Cooking had become dangerous. My hands dropped things without warning. I understood their concerns. But it was the way they said it, the detachment, the efficiency, as if I were an elderly pet and they were looking for the right shelter. By morning, I made a decision. I'd spent decades working, saving, living below my means. After Margaret passed, I sold the house we'd lived in for 30 years and downsized to a modest 2-bedroom apartment. The equity from that sale, along with our retirement savings, was safely sitting in a separate account. $450,000. I'd always intended to leave it to David when I passed part of the invisible contract of being a parent, I suppose. But now I started to think, why wait? What if I gave it to him now? Not as a gift, but as an investment in me. If they needed space, fine. Let's get them space. What if they used that money to buy a new house near me with room for me to live with them? I could contribute, I could help. I could even hire a part-time nurse. I wouldn't be a burden. I'd be close but not invasive. Surely David would see the value in that. Surely Heather would appreciate not having to pay for a home on their own, and I wouldn't have to be shipped off like a broken appliance. It was a win-win. I pulled out the bank statement, my hand trembling slightly. The numbers were still there. The amount was real. The dream was possible. I rehearsed the conversation in my head dozens of times. What tone to use, what not to say, how to seem confident but not desperate. I wanted them to feel like it was a partnership, not a plea. I called David's office and asked if he could stop by during his lunch break. "What's this about?" he asked, already defensive. "Nothing bad," I said lightly. "I just have something important I want to run by you. Won't take more than half an hour." He agreed reluctantly. At exactly 1:00 p.m., he knocked and walked in with the same purposeful gait I'd seen since he was a teenager. No coat off, no small talk. "You okay?" you sounded serious. "I'm okay," I said. "Come sit down." He dropped onto the edge of the couch like a man waiting for a dentist appointment. I sat across from him in my worn armchair and opened the folder with the statement. "I wanted to tell you something I haven't shared before," I began. "After I sold the house and with what your mother and I saved, I ended up with $450,000. His eyebrows shot up. "Seriously?" "Seriously? I didn't know you had that kind of money." "No one does," I said simply. "I've kept it quiet, but now I'm thinking about using it or offering it for something that might help both of us." He leaned forward slightly, still suspicious. "I'm listening." "I'll give you the entire amount," I said carefully, "on one condition, that you and Heather use it to buy a house here in town. A house with space for me, a guest room, or even a small suite. I can live with you, help out, pay bills, and I'll still bring in a modest pension. I won't be a burden." His face froze, not in anger, not in joy, just calculation. I could see it, that mental math clicking behind his eyes. Mortgage rates, square footage, commuting distance, resale value. "That's generous," he finally said, unexpected. "I thought it made more sense than just waiting to die and leaving you a check." "Don't say that." "It's reality," I replied. "But this way I'd get the care I need and you'd get a home. It helps everyone." He nodded slowly. "I'll need to discuss it with Heather." "Of course," I said, "but I'd like to hear what you think first." He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit from when he was a boy. "Well, 450K is a lot," he said, "and it could really change things for us, but this neighborhood's not ideal. The schools aren't great. Heather's work is 45 minutes away. I'm just not sure if this is the best place long term." "It's not forever," I replied. "Just a few years. I'm not asking for eternity, just a chance to stay with family." "I'll talk to Heather," he repeated, more firmly this time. "We'll think it over and call you tomorrow." He stood up before I could respond. A quick, almost polite hug, then out the door. As it closed behind him, I leaned back in the chair, exhausted but hopeful. I'd offered the best I had. Literally, I couldn't do more. And I dared to believe, for the first time in weeks, that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to face the end alone. 3 days passed. No call. I told myself they were busy, that Heather had work, David had meetings, the kids had school, that this wasn't avoidance, it was scheduling. But after the third silent day, I felt the truth settle in. They were stalling, and maybe, just maybe, deciding how to say no. I hadn't pressed. I didn't want to be that kind of father, desperate, insistent, clinging to dignity with one hand while begging with the other. I simply waited. Every hour that passed chipped away at the fragile hope I dared to build. On the fourth day, I decided to get out of the apartment. I called Doris, my neighbor across the hall, to ask if she could drive me to the bank. I told her I just wanted to check on my account, make sure everything was in order, a half-truth. Really, I just needed to move, to breathe. Doris, bless her, was full of arthritis but more energetic than most 20-year-olds. She picked me up in her dusty Ford and talked the whole way about a cooking show she hated but couldn't stop watching. After the bank, she suggested coffee. "I know you don't like chain shops," she said, "but there's a little cafe near the mall, much quieter." I agreed. We parked, walked slowly to the cafe, and as we approached the entrance I heard something. A voice. Familiar, sharp, confident. "David." I stopped in my tracks. He was inside, seated at a small table by the window, deep in conversation with a man in a suit, clearly a realtor. I gestured to Doris, "Let's sit over here." We found a table 1 row behind his. He hadn't noticed us. He was too engrossed in his fantasy. On the table between them, papers, property listings, color brochures with glossy photos, and in David's voice, excitement I hadn't heard in years. "This place is incredible," he said. "The kitchen's got an island. The school nearby's one of the best in the state, 5 minutes from the beach. Heather's going to love it." The realtor smiled. "And the price is very reasonable for oceanfront access. 3 beds, private yard, modern build, it'll go fast." They flipped through more pages. "This is our dream house," David said. "We'll have the down payment soon. We've got funds coming in, and it's time we finally moved." I sat frozen. The ocean. We had never talked about the ocean. Our deal was for a house here near me, near my doctors, my community, my fragile routine. Then came the knife. The realtor asked casually, "And what about your dad? You mentioned he was sick." David nodded. "Yeah, he's got MS. Progressive. Needs care soon. We found a great facility for him back here in town, Sunny Hollow or something. Full staff, great reputation. He'll be better off there." My heart dropped. Better off there. The realtor nodded sympathetically. "That's a tough call, but the right one." David leaned back in his chair. "And honestly, my dad wants us to be happy. He insisted we use the money for what's best for our family. He's the one pushing us to go for it." I could feel the blood drain from my face. That was a lie. I had never said that, never even implied it. The deal was clear. Help me, live with me, and I'd give them the money. They were skipping the condition and pretending it was a blank check. "Here's your tea, Thomas," Doris said softly, breaking the trance. She placed the cup in front of me gently, sensing something was wrong. "You okay?" I forced a nod. "Actually, I think I need to go home. I'm not feeling well." She saw my face and didn't ask questions. We stood, quietly, carefully. I didn't look back at the table as we left. He never saw me. He never knew I'd heard. Back in the car, I didn't say a word. Doris kept her silence too. The world outside kept moving, people shopping, walking, laughing. But inside me, something had snapped. I had offered everything, every dollar I had saved. I had laid out a path that would let us share our lives again. And in return, he twisted the truth. He turned me into a burden and used my money for a future that erased me from it. By the time we got home, I knew what I had to do. I thanked Doris, walked inside and picked up the phone, called the bank, asked for my manager. "I want to restrict all transfers," I said. "No wire activity unless I'm present in person." "Yes, Mr. Alden," he said. "Do you suspect fraud?" "No," I said, "but I just saw my son plan to commit it." That night I sat in the dark with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring at the table where I had imagined family dinners, grandchildren laughing, my son smiling over morning coffee. All illusions. All of it. The dream had been mine, not theirs. And they had never even wanted it. The phone rang the next morning at 9:03. I was still in my robe, staring blankly at the corner of the room, wondering how people started their days after having their hearts broken. It was David. He didn't wait for pleasantries. "Dad," he said, breathless, "what happened to the account?" I stayed silent. "I went to the bank yesterday to get details for the transfer. They said the money's frozen, locked, until you authorize it in person." "I know," I said evenly. There was a pause, confusion, then frustration. You changed the terms, without telling me." "No," I replied, "I changed my mind." He laughed, but there was no humor in it, only disbelief. "You can't just back out," he snapped. "We had an agreement." "No, David," I said, standing slowly. "We had a conditional offer, and you broke it." He went quiet again. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you," I said, "at the cafe, with the realtor, talking about the house by the ocean, about the boarding home, about how I insisted you take the money, that I'd be better off there." "Dad, wait." "You lied," I said, calmly, firmly, "to a stranger, but more importantly to yourself." There was silence on the other end, then a sigh, then the tone shifted from shocked to defensive. "We were just exploring options," he said. "It's not what it looked like." "You already told the realtor you had the money coming," I said. "That means you'd already made up your mind." "I was trying to find the best path for everyone," he said, now raising his voice. "For you too. Do you really want to live in this apartment, dying slowly, alone, getting worse every month?" "Yes," I said, "if the alternative is being discarded." "That's not fair," he barked. "You think Heather and I are monsters. You think we don't care." I took a breath. "I think you care in theory, but in practice, you want me out of the way, you want my money, and you don't want the mess of my body or my needs disrupting your perfect life." "That's not true." "Then why lie?" I asked. Why not tell me the truth that you didn't want me living with you, that you just wanted a house and thought I wouldn't find out? There was another pause, a long one. I don't know, he finally said. I don't know what I thought. You thought I was too old, too weak, too desperate to notice. His voice hardened again. So that's it, you're just cutting us off. No, David, I said, finally sitting down. You did that when you sat at that cafe and made plans that erased me. You're being dramatic. I'm being honest, I replied. Something you should try. He sighed heavily. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything, I said. I just want you to understand that I'm not giving you the money. Not now, not ever. You said it was for the family. It was, and you showed me exactly what family means to you. The conversation fell apart after that. He called me selfish, said I'd ruined their lives, said I lured him in with a false promise, only to snatch it away like a game. At one point, he even shouted that I was too sick to be making financial decisions. That's when I knew I'd made the right call. When someone you love weaponizes your illness to take control of your life, that's not love, that's strategy. When he finally hung up, I just sat there. Not angry. Not even sad. Just free. Later that day, I called my lawyer, made an appointment to update my will, removed David as the primary heir. It hurt more than I let myself admit, but it was necessary. I had always imagined leaving that money to him, a parting gift, a final sign of trust, but now I saw it clearly. He didn't want a father. He wanted an investor. And I wasn't interested in funding my own erasure. That evening, I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. The room was quiet. My body ached. The future felt uncertain. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. I may be losing strength, but I hadn't lost myself. Not yet. The next morning, he showed up at my apartment without calling. I heard the doorbell at 8:55 a.m., early, insistent like a summons. I shuffled to the door with my walker, muscles still stiff from sleep. When I opened it, David barreled past me like a storm. His hair was uncombed, his shirt half-buttoned. His eyes looked wild with panic or maybe anger, or both. Why haven't you been answering your phone? Because I didn't want to talk, I said simply. He stood in the middle of my living room, breathing heavily. This is insane. You can't just pull the money. We've already started the paperwork. We've made a down payment. You're screwing us over. I moved to sit down in my armchair slowly. No, I said, you screwed yourself the moment you decided to lie. We were going to tell you, he shouted. We were just figuring out how to explain it. Explain what? I asked. That you were going to take the money and send me away, that you thought I wouldn't notice, that you decided my future for me. He didn't respond. Instead, he paced, fast, agitated. You don't understand what it's like, he spat. Trying to juggle kids, work, bills, and now you with your condition. My condition, I repeated, is not your prison, but neither is it your excuse to abandon me. We didn't abandon you. You were going to put me in a home, by the ocean, while you enjoyed my life savings. His jaw clenched. It wasn't like that. I heard everything, David. You told the realtor I insisted on it, that I wanted you to be happy. That was a lie. He stopped pacing. His voice dropped. So what? You're just going to die alone out of spite. No, I said. I'm going to live with dignity out of choice. His expression changed again, this time rage. You're being selfish. I spent my whole life not being selfish. I snapped. 34 years with your mother, a career built around responsibility and raising you. Every choice I made was for someone else. And now, when I ask for one thing, you didn't ask, I cut in. You manipulated, you took, and then you blamed me for noticing. He stared at me. His eyes were hard now, cold. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, looking at him dead on. "What I regret is thinking we were still family." That broke him. He threw up his hands. "Fine. You want to die in this crumbling apartment, alone, watching daytime TV and dragging yourself to the toilet, be my guest. But don't expect us to come back, or the kids." My chest tightened. "You're going to keep my grandchildren away from me now." "I'm going to protect them," he hissed. "From your bitterness, from this guilt-tripping manipulation, from your sad little spiral." I didn't reply. I just pointed to the door. "Get out." He didn't move for a moment. Then he grabbed his coat, yanked it over his shoulder, and stormed to the entrance. "You don't exist to me anymore," he said before slamming the door. And that was it. My son was gone. Not just from my apartment, from my life. I sat in silence, staring at the empty space where he had stood, where hope had once stood, where maybe, in some other version of life, reconciliation could have lived. But that version had burned, and the ashes still stung my throat. I didn't cry, not then, not for him. But when I got up and walked to the bookshelf, when I saw the photo of him as a boy, holding a toy train with both hands, beaming like the sun, that's when the tears came. Quiet, hot, brief. Then I wiped them away and made tea. Because that's what you do. You keep going. Even when the last door closes. After David left, the silence in my apartment was heavier than any noise I'd ever heard. The kind of silence that presses down on you and makes your thoughts echo like thunder. I realized then I was truly alone, not just in body, but in spirit. Family had drifted away, and with it, the dreams I'd held onto so tightly. But life, as always, had a strange way of offering new paths when all others seemed closed. I remembered an old friend, Vernon, a colleague from my days at the train station. We were inseparable in our youth, fishing buddies, soccer fans, trusted confidants. Vernon had passed away 3 years earlier, suddenly, leaving behind a daughter named Evelyn. Evelyn was a quiet, thoughtful woman with deep blue eyes and an old soul. She worked at the city library and shared my love for classic literature. Over the years, she and I had developed a gentle friendship, built on mutual respect and a shared passion for books. I hadn't seen her much lately. My illness and her busy life had made our meetings rare, but I knew she was someone special. I thought about calling her for days, then finally mustered the courage. I wanted to see her again, not just for company, but for hope. When I dialed her number, my fingers trembled. I wasn't sure what to say or how she would react, but the moment she answered, her warm voice melted away some of my fear. "Hamish, is that you?" she asked softly. "It is," I said. "It's been a long time." We talked briefly about books, about the library, and about life. Then I asked if she might come by for tea. I had something important to discuss. To my relief, she agreed without hesitation. The evening she arrived, she brought a new novel by one of my favorite authors and a smile that warmed the cold corners of my apartment. We sat by the window, drinking tea and sharing stories like old friends do, rediscovering a connection that time had softened but never broken. When the moment came, I told her everything about my illness, the loneliness, the betrayal, and my dwindling options. "I have some savings," I said quietly, "and I want to offer you a proposition." Her eyes widened with surprise, but also with compassion. "I'd like you to help me," I explained. "Not as a nurse, but as a companion, someone who can help with daily tasks, share conversations, and bring life back into these quiet rooms. In return, when I'm gone, I'd leave my savings to you. It's not just money, it's trust." She listened carefully, never interrupting. When I finished, she smiled gently. "This is a serious offer," she said. "I'll need time to think it over." I nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finding someone who saw me as a person, not a burden. Over the next few days, Evelyn and I talked often. She asked practical questions, weighed the responsibilities, and shared her own struggles. But beneath the business was something real, a chance for me to reclaim dignity and companionship. When she finally agreed, relief washed over me like a balm. For the first time in months, I could imagine a future that wasn't filled with fear and loneliness. This was a chance, not just to survive but to live. Evelyn's arrival was like a fresh breeze through my dim apartment. From the moment she stepped inside, something shifted. The weight of loneliness, the cold shadows of illness, all seemed to ease just a little. She moved with quiet grace, unpacking a few books, setting down a vase of fresh flowers she'd brought, and arranging the teacups with care. It felt less like a caretaker coming into a patient's home and more like an old friend returning. Our days settled into a gentle rhythm. Evelyn would arrive in the early afternoon, bringing warmth and conversation. She helped with the small but exhausting tasks that had grown mountains in my daily life, cooking simple meals, tidying the living room, fetching groceries. But what I treasured most was our talks. We'd discuss books, from the classics like Dickens and Tolstoy to authors I'd never heard of before. She'd read aloud when my eyes grew tired, her voice steady and expressive. Sometimes, we'd debate a passage or muse over a character's fate, losing ourselves in worlds beyond my shrinking apartment. There was a comfort in her presence, a companionship that didn't pity or rush me. She saw me as a person with stories left to tell, not just a man fading away. As weeks turned into months, my health declined. The stiffness in my legs worsened. Walking became a challenge. Evelyn noticed everything, the small changes, the growing difficulty. One day, she gently suggested moving in. At first, 3 days a week was enough, she said. But you need more care now. I want to be here. I hesitated, not wanting to impose, but her resolve was quiet and firm. My apartment rent keeps going up, she explained with a small smile. And here you have a spare room. It'll be easier for both of us. So Evelyn moved in. She brought her few belongings and many books, filling the empty shelves with stories and memories. Our lives intertwined, and the apartment blossomed into a home, filled with laughter, music, and quiet companionship. Morning routines became shared rituals. Evelyn helped me get ready, prepared breakfast, and sometimes we ate together, savoring oatmeal or scrambled eggs, sharing thoughts about the day ahead. Evenings were for reading. She'd read to me when my eyes were too weak, bringing stories to life with her voice. We rediscovered old favorites and explored new authors, deepening our bond. Beyond care, she became my confidante. We spoke openly about life, loss, love, and hope. Illness no longer defined me. I was a man living fully with dignity and friendship. Her presence was a gift, one I never expected but now couldn't imagine living without. It had been nearly a year since I'd last spoken to David. Our relationship was strained, fractured beyond repair, or so I thought. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn brought me the phone. "I think it's for you," she said softly. I glanced at the screen. The name flashed, David. A wave of emotions hit me, hesitation, anger, a flicker of hope. "Do you want me to answer?" Evelyn asked gently. "No," I said quietly, "I will." I pressed the answer button and put the phone on speaker, so I wouldn't have to hold it. "Dad, it's me, David," came the familiar voice, strained and uncertain. "Hello, son," I replied calmly. "It's been a long time." "Yeah," he said. "It's been a while. How's your health?" "As well as can be expected," I said. "Deteriorating, but I'm managing." There was a pause. "I heard about Evelyn," he said quietly. "She's been helping you." "Yes," I answered. "She's been a blessing." David cleared his throat. "Dad, I've been thinking about our last conversation, what happened. "I was wrong, I'm sorry." His apology sounded rehearsed, almost insincere. Or maybe my bitterness blocked me from believing him. "What exactly are you sorry for?" I asked. "Everything," he sighed. "How I talked to you, the plans I made without you knowing, taking so long to call." "And why did you decide to call now?" I asked. There was silence. Then finally he said, "I miss you, and the kids miss you too. Nora asks about you all the time." I couldn't hide my doubt. "I thought you didn't want them to see me," I said. "So they'd remember me as I am now, not as a helpless old man." "That's not true," he pleaded. I was angry. His voice cracked, like a child seeking forgiveness. I wanted to believe him. But years of hurt don't disappear overnight. I said nothing for a moment, then softly, "Thank you for calling." We talked a little longer, cautiously, carefully. I told him about Evelyn, about my days, about the little joys I still found in life. When we said goodbye, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The road to healing would be long, if it existed at all. But that call reminded me that even broken things sometimes find a way to make noise again. As the days passed after David's call, I found myself reflecting on everything, the past, the present, and the future that awaited me. Life had not gone the way I had imagined. The family I dreamed of, the closeness I hoped for with my son and grandchildren, it was gone, replaced by distance and disappointment. But in that loss I discovered something else: freedom. Freedom from the weight of false expectations. Freedom from the ache of betrayal. Freedom to live on my own terms. Evelyn had become my anchor, a companion who saw me as more than my illness, more than a fading shadow of a man. Together, we filled my remaining days with meaning, with laughter, with stories, with quiet moments that made life worth living. I stopped mourning the family I thought I'd have and started embracing the one I had, imperfect, yes, but real. I learned that dignity isn't given, it's chosen. That love isn't always blood. That sometimes the family you find is the family you need. My body may weaken, but my spirit remains strong. And though the end is inevitable, I will meet it with grace, surrounded by kindness, respect, and the warmth of true friendship. Life's final chapter isn't about what we lose. It's about what we hold on to. And I choose to hold on to hope. Life has a way of changing without warning, turning familiar paths into roads we never expected to travel. 5 years ago, I was full of life, confident in my routine and surrounded by the people I loved. My name is Thomas Alden, and I worked as a train station supervisor, a job I never wanted to leave. It gave me peace, a daily rhythm, and a sense of purpose. Weekends were for fishing, watching the sun dip behind the hills, and enjoying simple pleasures. Climbing 3 flights of stairs to my apartment was something I did without a second thought. My wife, Margaret, was the heart of my world for 34 years before she passed from lung cancer. Her absence left a hollow I tried to fill with memories: the wind chimes she hung in the kitchen, her blue mug resting untouched in the cabinet, her scarves still folded neatly in the closet. Our son, David, was ambitious, restless, and never satisfied with what I had. He dreamed bigger than I could understand and often looked at me as if I had settled for less. Then came the diagnosis: progressive multiple sclerosis. At first, it was just a slight numbness, a few stumbles. But soon it became harder to ignore. The fall in the grocery store parking lot was the moment I could no longer pretend. The doctor's words rang in my ears like a sentence: "You may have 2 or 3 years left of relative independence." Since then my world shrunk. The hands that once prepared Sunday dinners trembled too much to hold a knife. Walking was a challenge, and the stairs became mountains. My son listened to the diagnosis with clinical detachment, asking about insurance, about logistics, never about how I was feeling. The distance between us grew, not just physical, but emotional. Sunday dinners became a test of endurance. David arrived, confident and cold, his wife ignoring me as if I were invisible, their children glued to their devices, too distracted to acknowledge their grandfather. Heather's disdain for my cooking orders was clear: the wrong food, the wrong diet. David's impatience was sharp. I was a burden, a waiter in my own home. When they suggested a care facility, their words cut deeper than any illness. But I still had hope. I had savings, $450,000, the fruit of years of hard work and sacrifice. I offered it to David, hoping he'd see it as an invitation to build a life with me, not just a chance to buy a house and push me away. I imagined us sharing breakfasts, stories with the grandchildren, a future where I wasn't alone or forgotten. Instead, I overheard their true plans in a cafe, an oceanfront house for them, a boarding home for me. They lied to a realtor, to each other, and to me. The betrayal was complete. I blocked access to the money, confronted David, and in that confrontation saw the son I thought I knew dissolve into a stranger. David left, taking the children with him, declaring I was no longer part of their lives. The door closed behind him, heavy and final. In that silence, I found unexpected freedom, but also loneliness deeper than ever before. Then came Evelyn, the daughter of my late friend Vernon, a gentle soul with a love for books and quiet conversation. I reached out, hoping for friendship, companionship, and found more than I expected. She agreed to help, to be with me, not as a nurse but as a friend, reading aloud, sharing moments, and giving life back to my apartment and my heart. Our bond grew. When my condition worsened, she moved in. Together we created a new family, one built on respect, kindness, and shared stories. A year later, David called. Apologies stumbled from his lips, but the wounds ran too deep. I listened, grateful for the voice but certain of my path. Life had not given me what I wanted, but it gave me what I needed: dignity, hope, and friendship in my final chapter. The family dinners used to mean so much to me, a chance to connect, to feel part of something. But over the past year, they became a reminder of how far we drifted. David would arrive right on time, but his eyes rarely met mine. Heather treated my apartment like a waiting room, and their children barely looked up from their screens. The conversations were polite, but hollow, and the warmth I once felt was gone. One particular dinner sticks in my mind. I had ordered Italian, something simple, comforting. David made a face when Heather complained about the carbs, sending off a barely concealed glare my way, as if I were responsible for her discomfort. Their impatience was palpable. When I tried to help, fetching napkins or refilling glasses, their attitude made me feel less like a father and more like a servant. David's suggestion to consider a care facility hit like a punch. He called it reasonable and practical, but I heard something else: a dismissal of my wishes, a plan made without me. That night, lying awake, I wrestled with despair and pride. I knew I needed help, but I wasn't ready to surrender my home, my independence, or my dignity. And I certainly wasn't ready to be sent away like a forgotten relic. The next morning, I made my decision. I would use the savings Margaret and I had built to try to keep my family together on my terms. I called David and asked him to stop by during lunch. When he arrived, I told him about the money, about my hope that he and Heather would buy a house nearby, with room for me. I offered to help pay the bills, to be part of their lives, not just an obligation. I wanted a future that included family, companionship, and respect. His reaction was cautious, calculating. He brought up schools, commutes, and neighborhood concerns. I listened, trying to understand, but beneath the practicality I sensed hesitation, or worse, reluctance. David promised to talk to Heather. I waited, hopeful. But days passed in silence. Then, that fateful day in the cafe. Overhearing David and a realtor discussing a dream house by the ocean and a care facility for me back in town shattered everything. Their plan was clear: a life by the beach for them, a place to be tucked away from me. I felt betrayed, used, discarded. I blocked access to the funds, confronted David, and demanded honesty. His denials crumbled when I revealed what I had heard. The confrontation ended with anger and hurtful words. He left, slamming the door on the family we once were. I was alone again, but with newfound resolve. And then came Evelyn. Evelyn was a breath of fresh air in my darkening world. The daughter of my old friend Vernon, she carried a quiet strength and kindness that felt like a balm to my soul. When I reached out to her, I didn't know what to expect. I only hoped for a friend, someone to share my days with, someone who might listen. She accepted my invitation without hesitation. From the moment she stepped into my apartment, the space seemed to fill with light. Evelyn didn't treat me like a patient or a burden. She treated me like a man with stories to tell, with a life still worth living. Our days grew into a comforting routine. She helped me with simple tasks that had become impossible alone, preparing meals, organizing my medicines, running errands. But beyond that, she gave me something I'd almost forgotten: companionship. We talked for hours, about books, history, the small joys that made life meaningful. She read to me when my hands trembled too much to hold a book. We laughed, shared memories, and sometimes sat in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. As my condition worsened, Evelyn's presence became even more essential. She gently suggested she move in, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to be there, to share life's burdens and joys. Her company transformed my apartment from a lonely place of fading memories into a home filled with warmth and hope. Together, we built a new chapter, one defined not by loss, but by connection and dignity. Living with Evelyn was a gift I hadn't dared to hope for. She arrived each day with a gentle smile and a quiet patience that made even the hardest moments bearable. My body was failing, the walking grew harder, the tremors more frequent, but her presence was a steady anchor in the storm. She arranged the apartment with care, placing books on the shelves, lighting candles in the evenings, and keeping the space clean and inviting. More than that, she brought laughter back into my life, the kind of laughter that warms the heart and lightens the soul. Mornings began with her helping me dress, preparing simple breakfasts, and sitting with me by the window as the sunlight spilled across the room. She read aloud passages from novels and poetry, her voice breathing life into words I thought I might never hear again. We shared dreams and regrets. She listened to my stories about Margaret, about David, and about a life that felt like it was slipping away too fast. And I listened as she spoke of her own struggles, her hopes for the future, and the love she carried for her late father. It wasn't just care, it was friendship, it was respect, it was dignity. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between conversations, I would reach out and take her hand. A silent thank you for reminding me that even in the twilight of life, one can find light. Nearly a year passed like this, each day a blend of challenges and small victories. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang, a sound that once brought joy but now stirred a mix of anxiety and hope. The caller ID showed David's name. Evelyn handed me the phone gently. When I answered, his voice was tentative, a man weighed down by regret and uncertainty. He apologized for everything, the lies, the silence, the hurt. He told me the kids missed me, that Nora often asked questions about her grandfather. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to forgive. But years of pain and disappointment don't disappear in a single conversation. Still, that call was a bridge, fragile and shaky, between a fractured past and an uncertain future. We talked carefully, sharing small updates, cautiously reopening the door to communication. When the call ended, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Healing, I knew, would take time, maybe more than I had left. In the quiet that followed, I thought about life, the choices I had made, the losses I had endured, and the unexpected joys that had found me. The family I once knew was gone, but I had found a new one in Evelyn. I realized dignity was not something granted by others, but a decision I made every day. Though my body weakened, my spirit remained strong. I stopped mourning what was lost and started cherishing what remained. Life's final chapters are not about endings. They are about the courage to choose hope, kindness, and love, even when the world feels cold. And so I continue, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a man who chose to live with grace, surrounded by true friendship and the light of new beginnings. The mornings were often the hardest. The moment I opened my eyes, the weight of my body pressed down with a stubborn heaviness, reminding me of the battle I fought daily. Multiple sclerosis was an invisible enemy, stealthy and cruel, stealing strength one small piece at a time. Yet Evelyn's presence transformed those difficult mornings into moments of calm. She would gently wake me, her voice soft but steady, guiding me through the motions of the day. Sometimes she read poetry while helping me dress, the words weaving a delicate tapestry of comfort and hope around us. There was dignity in those small rituals, a reminder that life could still hold beauty even as it slipped through my fingers. Evelyn never rushed me. Patience was her gift. She understood that every movement was a triumph, every smile a victory over the sickness that sought to consume me. Together, we celebrated these victories, no matter how small. Our conversations became a lifeline. We shared stories, not just the happy ones but the painful, raw truths that lay beneath the surface. I spoke of Margaret, her laughter echoing in my memory like a melody I could never forget. I told Evelyn about David, the son I raised with love but lost to ambition and bitterness. And she, in turn, shared her own stories of loss and resilience, painting pictures of a life shaped by both hardship and hope. She read aloud from her favorite books, novels full of courage, redemption, and grace. Those stories gave me strength on the darkest days, reminding me that even the broken can find meaning. One afternoon, as the rain tapped gently against the window, Evelyn took my hand in hers. "You're not alone," she said simply. And in that moment, I believed her. The quiet afternoons passed in peaceful companionship. We would sit by the window, watching the world move outside as if through a veil. Children played in the street, neighbors chatted in their yards, and life continued beyond my walls. Evelyn's company was a balm to my soul. She helped me face the slow decline with grace. She reminded me that even in the face of loss, there was connection. There was love. Though my body weakened, my spirit found new strength in her presence. I was no longer just a patient or a forgotten man. I was a friend, a storyteller, a man still worthy of care and affection. Sometimes, as evening fell, I would look at her quietly, this woman who had stepped into my life when I needed her most, and I would feel a deep gratitude that words could never fully express. This added detail deepens the emotional core of the story, focusing on daily life with Evelyn, their bond, and the dignity preserved amid decline. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Evelyn's presence became more than just assistance. It was a lifeline. She was my eyes when I struggled to see, my hands when mine faltered, and my voice when words felt too heavy to speak. One evening, as the sky darkened and shadows grew long, Evelyn and I sat by the fire, a rare comfort in my chilly apartment. She was reading from a worn copy of Great Expectations, her voice low and steady. The story of Pip's journey mirrored my own in unexpected ways, a boy hopeful for belonging, only to find that true family is not always the one you're born into. I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. When she finished, I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," I whispered, "for reminding me that hope can live in the smallest moments." She smiled softly. "You've taught me that too." That night, as she helped me to bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't alone. I was not forgotten. The world outside might be indifferent, even cruel, but here within these walls there was kindness. There was love. Later, during a quiet afternoon, Evelyn told me about her dreams to one day open a small bookstore, a haven for stories and for people seeking solace. She spoke with a passion that filled the room with light, and I felt a surge of hope for her future, even as mine was fading. "I want you to be part of it," she said, her eyes shining. "You've got stories no one else can tell." I laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. "Only if you promise to be my editor." We both chuckled, the moment fragile but full of warmth. Yet even in this newfound peace, memories of David lingered like a shadow. The phone call he made almost a year ago was both a balm and a wound. His apologies felt heavy with regret, but the past was a vast canyon between us. I didn't know if reconciliation was possible, but I chose to keep the door open, if only a crack. For the sake of the grandchildren, for the hope that someday, love might heal old wounds. As my health declined further, Evelyn became not just a companion but my anchor. She learned how to manage my medications, how to help me through pain, and how to soothe my fears on nights when the darkness felt endless. Together we faced the inevitable, not with despair but with courage. I chose dignity. I chose grace. And as the final chapters of my life unfolded, I realized that family is not just defined by blood, but by those who stay, who care, who listen, and who love. Evelyn was my family now, and with her I found peace. Days turned into weeks, and with every breath the weight of my illness pressed harder. There were mornings when even lifting my hand felt like climbing a mountain, and nights when the shadows crept in, whispering doubts and fears. But Evelyn's steady presence was a beacon in that darkness. She never faltered, never showed impatience or pity. Instead, she brought quiet strength, the kind that steadies a soul on the edge. One afternoon, I found myself staring out the window, watching the seasons change. The trees outside had lost their leaves, and the wind carried a chill that hinted at winter's approach. Evelyn sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. Neither of us said much. Sometimes words weren't needed. It was in those silences that I felt the depth of our bond. Not built on grand gestures, but on countless small moments, a shared smile, a gentle touch, the reading of a favorite poem. I thought about the life I'd led, the years with Margaret, the pride and pain with David, the unexpected friendship with Evelyn. My story was one of loss, yes, but also of resilience. I had faced abandonment, betrayal, and solitude, but I had also found grace, compassion, and a new family. The days became shorter and my body weaker. Simple tasks turned monumental. Walking across the room was a struggle, eating without assistance, a challenge. But Evelyn was there through it all, her patience unwavering. She learned to anticipate my needs before I voiced them. When the pain flared, she held my hand and whispered soothing words. When despair threatened to take hold, she reminded me of the strength still within. One evening, as twilight bled into night, she read aloud from The Old Man and the Sea. The story of endurance, of fighting against the odds, resonated deeply. I closed my eyes and let the words cradle me. When she finished, I told her, "You are the light I didn't know I needed." She smiled softly, "And you are the courage I'm honored to witness." Despite the shadows, there were moments of joy. We celebrated small victories, a good day without pain, a successful walk to the kitchen, a new book discovered. We marked holidays quietly, but with intention. On Christmas, Evelyn hung a small wreath on the door and baked cookies that filled the apartment with warmth. We sang carols softly, our voices mingling in the cold air. These moments, though simple, stitched together a tapestry of love and hope. The phone rang again months later. This time it was David. His voice was softer, more uncertain. He spoke of regrets and longing, of missed chances and hope for forgiveness. I listened, understanding that wounds take time to heal, and sometimes healing begins with a single conversation. I told him that while the past could not be erased, I was open to finding peace, not for him but for myself. In my final months, Evelyn became my constant. We sat by the window, watching the world outside move on without me, yet feeling connected through shared memories and quiet companionship. I found peace in the knowledge that, though my body was failing, my spirit remained unbroken. And as the sun set on my life, I knew that dignity, love, and hope had carried me through. I was not alone. I was loved. In those final months, I often thought about who I used to be, healthy, strong, confident in the future. But now I understood that true strength isn't in the body, but in the soul. And it was that strength I managed to hold on to thanks to those who stayed by my side. Every day with Evelyn was a gift. We listened to music together, recalled the past, planned book club meetings at the library where she worked. Sometimes she read me letters from her friends, shared her dreams and hopes. I saw in her not just a helper, but a true friend who gave me the chance to live my final years with a sense of dignity. Our conversations often touched on life and death, inevitable topics I no longer feared discussing. Evelyn listened carefully, supported me, and helped me understand that even leaving this world is part of the journey, not the end. One evening, when I could no longer speak, she sat beside me and quietly took my hand. It felt like she understood without words that the time to say goodbye had come. And in that farewell, there was no bitterness or fear. There was only peace, the peace of a man who had lived his story honestly and with love. I was leaving, knowing I was leaving behind not only memories, but an example of how to keep one's humanity in the hardest times. My story is not just about illness or betrayal. It's a story about choice, the choice to live with dignity, to find light even in darkness, and to accept those willing to walk beside you. So ends my journey, but a new chapter begins for those who remain. As my strength waned, the days grew quieter, but my mind remained sharp. I often reflected on the twists and turns that life had taken, the joys and the heartbreaks, the unexpected friendships and the painful betrayals. Each moment had shaped me, teaching lessons about resilience and the true meaning of family. Evelyn was there through it all, a steadfast presence who never judged, who listened deeply, and who reminded me that even in the final chapters of life, connection and compassion matter most. Sometimes, when the world outside seemed indifferent, I felt a profound gratitude for this simple truth, that love does not always come from blood, but from those who choose to stay. In my last days, surrounded by the gentle care of someone who truly understood me, I found peace, a peace born not from forgetting the past, but from embracing the present with courage and grace. And so, when the time came to say goodbye, it was not with fear or regret, but with a heart full of gratitude for the life I had lived and the people who walked beside me. My story may have ended, but the impact of love and dignity I chose to hold onto will live on in those I leave behind. As I took my last breaths, I was not alone. Evelyn was there, holding my hand gently, her presence a steady light in the quiet room. There was no fear, no loneliness, only the warmth of a life embraced fully despite its hardships. Looking back, I realized my journey was never about what I lost, but what I found: resilience, dignity, and true companionship. The pain of betrayal by blood relatives was deep, but it never defined me. Instead, it was the kindness of a chosen family that carried me through. Life taught me that love is a choice, made every day in small acts of care, understanding, and presence. Evelyn's friendship reminded me that family is not just given, but made. My legacy is not measured by wealth or status, but by the courage to face life's trials with grace, and by the compassion we show one another. Though my story ends here, the love and lessons I leave behind will echo in the hearts of those who knew me, a quiet testament to a life well lived. and in that I find peace.